So, welcome to the Dead Marshes, and this is a rather interesting map. It's honestly one of my favourites of the new ones that have been added since Reforged was a thing, because it is, in many ways, just a regular pitch battle, but it has a lot of obstructions and a lot of opportunities for flanking, and also a lot of opportunities for just nice choke point battles that form, as opposed to being all about archers and cavalry, which a lot of pitch battles do tend to be, especially on the sort of more standard open maps. I was asked to play as Harad for this battle, so I played as them, and it's like a good and evil faction on each side. It's a 2v2, of course. So I brought 3 Southron archers. Again, these guys aren't anything particularly special, but they're pretty standard as far as archers go. They're pretty decent. The Serpent Guard, which are one of my favourite sort of basic men-at-arms tier units. They aren't as good as they were in Reforged, but they still offer that value for money. Well, I mean standard Third Age, but they still offer that value for money that the Serpent Guard always have, so I brought 3 of them. I also brought 3 units of Muhard Berserkers. This is a sort of more basic shock infantry unit. And I also have 2 Trollmen, you can always expect these when you face Harad, 2 Beast Tamers, again a Halberd unit, 2 Muhard Tribesmen and a Demons of the Desert, and then over here I have a Catapult, 2 Haradrim Spearmen, and in the back over there my general is in a Serpent Bodyguard, so that is my entire army. Let's move on to my ally, who is playing as Dale. Again, he's got a lot of Lake Town infantry, so his basic infantry is not going to be as good as mine, but his higher tier stuff will be considerably better. Like the Dale Swordmasters and the Royal Guard, 2 very, very strong units. And the Barding Herd as well. They're a very nice armoured halberdier unit. And these pikes. He also has Bardian Marksmen, and over here he has 2 units of Mounted Earls. So he went for certainly a bit more of a standard Dale army, where he also has some Athala Rangers up on the hill, but they're hidden at the moment. So, he went for a pretty standard, more defensive looking side to Dale. The Dale Swordmasters are really the only ones. Now, over here we have the Elves of the Woodland Realms. However, the one thing is they have a lot of their units hidden. They have some Hir en Ek and also some Hir e Bang. They have a lot of Woodland Rangers. They also have some of their Elder Royal units, some Dirith over there, I should say. And they also have Elder Pathfinders, 2 of them. There are also some more units over here of Dirith and Spears. So again, I like the Dirith and the Hir e Lang. The Lang are the obviously the 2-hander swordsmen, but I do like the Dirith as a unit, a nice shielded unit. And over on my side, I am being opposed by Isengard. Overshot it again. They've got Nazkai and Nazkai Bodyguard, Guards of Orthanc, Champions of the White Hand, Trolls of the White Hand. So they've brought basically all of their best stuff back here. So they've gone for a disparity army, really, in that they have all of their most scary units, but they have to compromise somewhere. They have a few units of Uruk-hai infantry. They also have Uruk-hai archers, however, and clansmen and Uruk-hai raiders, and that's where they compromise, because those 3 units are not as good as their contemporaries in other factions. He does have Uruk-hai infantry and Uruk-hai crossbows around the place, and a unit of wargs here. So without further ado, let's start the battle. Now, we're in a rather interesting situation here, because Harad and Isengard are slightly more aggressive factions. At least that is how, at least compared to Dale and the Woodland Realms. Over here, it's going to very rapidly turn into more of a skirmish-focused fight between the Woodland Realms and Dale. We're a close one as well, but it is something that the Woodland Realms should win because they have more range and more accuracy. Dale's armour will stand them in pretty good stead as the fight goes on, however, at least it should, because obviously not every archer is armour piercing, very few are, so the Woodland Realms are really going to have to use the choke points to their advantage and use their elite units to cut down some of Dale's more mid-tier units. Now I'm moving up my Serpent Guard first because I noticed that his archers are not immediately in range, so what I'm going to do is a floating tree, have a look at that. So I'm going to move up my Serpent Guard to be my front line. They're the most, well, aside from the Halberd unit that I have, the Beast Tamers are good at holding the line as well, but I want to have a nice front line, especially seeing as I saw that he had a lot of lower tier units, which the Serpent Guard should do very, very well against. The nastier units, though, especially stuff like the Nazkai, are going to do a real number on these guys should they get into position, especially if they're in shield wall. And the Trollmen, well, the Trolls, I should say, the Trollmen are my units. I did notice as well that he didn't have anything over here, at least over in this section of the map, so I'm bringing my catapult over and I'm going to try and get some pot shots on him through this little gap. It'll force him to move something forward at least, like catapults and artillery in general tend to cause a bit of panic. And backing up the Serpent Guard, I'm going to send over the Haradrim Spearmen just to cover the gaps in the shield walls. They won't be there for much other than just making sure the enemy don't get to my archers and my catapult. So I'm going to send forward my archers as well. I'm very glad when I saw the deployments that I was up against Isengard, because Harad are a poor matchup against the elves. All their good infantry units are good versus armour, and it's not something the Woodland Realms relies on. Over here, Dale are under attack by the elven archers. So if we go over here, we will see that he has these woodland sentinels and backed up by some Dirith. Now the woodland sentinels have considerable range advantage. In a skirmish fight, the Bardian marksmen do have the armour to outlast them, but that's only if they can get in range without taking a beating first. And the Woodland Realms have got a nice wide field of view here where they can set up all of their archers, whereas Dale are having to advance through slightly thinner choke points. As this goes along, however, this should work in Dale's favour, mainly because the Woodland Realms would be better off in choke points because they have less men in their units. Now if we move over here, Isengard is also making their advance. I decided to move forward as well. I'm starting to move my army around. So he's sending up his Dunland clansmen first. This is not too surprising, but he's not sending up anything of quality to reinforce this position. So again, they're taking a hail of arrow fire, and the arrows getting a lot of decent kills. However, they are advancing, so I am going to have to move my archers back. I sent forward 2 of them. Well, I'm going to also move my Serpent Guard forward. And against stuff like Dunland Clansmen, they're going to do very, very well for themselves. Really, they're pretty similar in many ways as to Uruk-hai infantry. So if the Uruk-hai infantry was coming forward, I'd be a little bit more nervous because he probably has the numbers to back them up. But he's sending forward his garbage first, which works out well for me. Obviously, if he sent forward his quality units as well, I would have sent forward my jabbies. I've got my archers all in a good position, firing down on his advance. If we look over here, though, Dale's archer force has taken a bit of a beating, and Dale are a good archer force, so it does show how dominant the Woodland Realms can be at range. They are now in position and firing, but ultimately the wide field of view that the elves have means that they're easily managing to get many kills. The accuracy is really helping them here. It's a bit of an interesting position because Dale can't really afford to advance as yet, otherwise they will just get cut to pieces. Oh, we can see over there the catapults getting in on the action, and Isengard's infantry line, well, Isengard's assault has clashed with my line. My units were in shield wall. A few of them did seep through the cracks, but the Haradrim Spearmen will sort out them. Like the Haradrim Spearmen against the Dunland Clansmen, I've mentioned both of them being garbage in the past. So fighting off here, it's really going to be down to numbers, and the numbers are on my side here. Serpent Guard, I always like the look of the Serpent Guard. I've always felt they, the scimitars and the round shields and the sort of Middle Eastern aesthetic they have going on is pretty cool, I thought. He's also really focusing his efforts on one side here, which isn't a bad idea when you're trying to force your way through, but he's not going to be able to force his way through this amount of mass. I've managed to plug the gaps with my spears. I've got this unit over here that's untouched, and my archers are still firing down. My catapult is getting some decent hits on this unit of Uruk-hai archers, as well as my own arrows firing down. The skirmish is going to be kind of interesting because really both of our forces have got a skirmish force that works better up close in the crossbows and the jabbies. Now over here, the elves are sending over some support because the fight with Dale is more of a skirmish one, so he's sending his cav. I was trying to flank around to break these Dunland Clansmen quickly with these Haradrim Spearmen, but unfortunately for me, the Elven Cavalry is going to charge into them, and this is going to do a ton of damage to a low tier spear unit. Unfortunately, I am shooting him with a lot of arrows, and I am getting a couple of kills. And against a high quality target like this, it's going to be, good value for money for each arrow. I should mention as well, Champion of Numenor and Dark Elven King are playing as Isengard and the Woodland Realms, and Dwayling and myself are playing as Dale and Harad. Now I'm retreating my Haradrim Spears back behind my shield walls. My shield walls are much more useful at dealing with cav charges, and I also have my Beast Tamers ready to come in just in case. In fact, I did notice that there was a flanking opportunity for the elves over here, so I did move my Beast Tamers over to here, and I'm going to block off this choke point. Controlling the choke points in this fight can be key. There are wider sections of the battle, like the one that the elves occupy at the moment, but ultimately it's not completely open. There are limitations here. We can see here, though, the Dale Archer force has been utterly massacred by the Woodland Realms, so they have really got off to a pretty damn good start here. However, Dale does have more archers on the way. The Athala Rangers will die even more quickly, but it is still more archers that Dale can bring to bear. What they really should have done is used all of the archers, at least in staggered lines, more quickly, so that they could challenge the Woodland Realms a little more. They're going to take a lot of losses like this, however. Now it is worth noting as well that the wargs over here are moving over, and they're sort of going to sit over here because you can go right around, and I did notice this, so I moved my cav over here. They are anti-cav units, the wargs, but it was really the best I could do to ward them off. They are fragile, so it's really a matter of biding your time where you use them. There's a building there. I did not notice that while playing. Now he's got his archers in position. He does have a lot of them, so the volume of arrows that are coming down are going to cause a bit of a problem for my archers. He is now sending forward some of his Uruk-hai infantry as well, and this is a much more serious unit. He has singled out one unit of Serpent Guard that he's trying to smash through, and this Serpent Guard is falling by the wayside pretty quickly in the face of this sort of more focused attack. Having said that though, I am sort of trying to hold the line with these Haradrim spearmen as well, and I'm going to bring forward my other unit of Beast Tamers to sort of form a halberd wall so that they can't easily smash through one section of the line. It's going to be a thin halberd wall, but it should still hold relatively well. My archers have taken virtually no casualties. However, my catapult has been the subject of ruthless arrow fire, which is unsurprising. It's got a bit of work done, but nothing too severe. I'd say it's probably paid for itself at this point, but only just. It's not delivered the decisive blow that I was really hoping for. He's got, well, my ally has got his cavalry over here as well, just to help defend against the wargs, to make sure they don't flank around, because that is a bit of a weakness for us. They could flank all the way around and go for Dale as well. It is an intriguing map, this one. I've got my other Southron archers firing over here. If we look over here at Dale's archer force, the skirmish is still going on, and it's a skirmish which Dale is still really struggling at. Let's go and have a look at how much damage he's actually done to the woodland realms. You know, he's got a decent amount of kills on these Bang, and Bang are an expensive unit, so it's very worthwhile. Again, another unit of Bang, but the elves have certainly won the skirmish with how many Dalian archers they've killed. 5 whole units basically have been rendered inert, whereas over here really 2 units have been made to look a little haggard, but that's about it. The elves, however, do have a bit of a problem with regards to numbers. Some of their units are still hidden, like Sindar Blade Masters and the like, but they are going to struggle against Dale's numbers in the late game, because when arrows run out, that's when the elves tend to struggle a bit. But even then, their archers are pretty good in melee, so it's not the end of the world provided they can use the choke points. Now over here, he's using fire arrows on my catapult. Again, not a terrible idea, but the catapult is largely been killed anyway at this point. Now over here we have the front line. This is really where the main confrontation is happening at the moment. He should really be sending up more men at this point. He is sending up more, but they're not running. They should be getting into the fight quickly, because I'm able to sort of surround him with my other unit of Serpent Guard now that my halberds are covering the whole line. And unfortunately for him, this means that the Uruk-hai infantry are getting cut down, and he's lost a lot of, admittedly, clansmen in the first wave, but if he had supported them with better infantry, he could have made this offensive stick a little bit faster than he has. But he is now sending up more men, and ultimately I do have quite a lot in reserve as well. Now I still have a lot of my lower tier spears. He has a lot of high tier stuff at the back as well, which I did notice. So I am waiting for that, because a lot of my units, Harad don't really have a lot of super high tier, and Isengard do have their Nazkai and their trolls, which I will struggle to deal with for the most part. I did have some ideas of what to do with regards to that. My catapult is still firing, despite the fact that the crew is pretty much dead at this point. So they have fought to the bitter end, as it were. I'm sending up my unit of Southron archers that are out of ammo again. They're pretty good to sort of block holes in the line. They're not going to get a tremendous amount of kills in melee, but they will at least add a bit of manpower to the front line, which the enemy is now doing. He's sending up Uruk-hai raiders to support, but ultimately this attack is not going to stick unless he sends up something a little bit more heavy duty. I'm trying to flank all the way around with my Southron archers to try and get into his archers so that they can't fire, because I'm running low on ammo, but he has units that took a lot more damage, so he's going to be firing for a longer period of time. And over here we see the Trolls of the White Hand coming up now. Nothing in my line here is particularly good against them. The halberds will do okay, but the halberds are sort of an insurance policy behind the line to make sure nothing can flank around. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to try and mob the Trolls with all 3 units of my Muhad Berserkers, and then they will join the front line. This should be a pretty cost-efficient unit to use against Isengard. They are, after all, shock infantry. Isengard are very much a faction focused on their armour and their consistency of units. So this should be good for me. Now if we look over here, the Dale player is sat back here with his pikeman. He has pretty handily lost the skirmish fight. He's still got a few units of archers, but really the battle here has not really begun in earnest just yet. If we look over here, we can see some woodland sentinels, so he's sending over a bit more support for his ally, because this is really where the epicenter of the battle is at the moment. When Dale and the Woodland Realms join in battle, it will be a bit more of a total war, so to speak. But over here, these southern archers that I was flanking around are going to get smashed, but it does at least keep their assault to be thin. You know, I don't want them to sort of spread out and engage my line as a whole. If I can keep them boxed up like this, that will be good. And so I've sort of left these southern archers. Now these woodland sentinels are coming in, so they will die pretty quickly, but I have pinned them. And the Serpent Guard, backed up by the Muhad Berserkers, should hold fast, even against a unit of Trolls. The Trolls, honestly, weren't a particularly devastating unit to use in that sort of situation. They could have used it early on, when it was just my Serpent Guard. If they used that to support the Clansmen and then followed that up with Uruk-hai infantry, I think they could have done more damage, because I wouldn't have been prepared for that as much as I was. The Berserkers were a little further back. Again, still got my Beast Tamers in here. I do like the look of the Haradrim units. Like the Muhad units, they look suitably savage for what the Haradrim is meant to be. And of course that does actually bring me to Harad's biggest weakness, and that is their survivability. If you wanted my opinion on Harad, which is why I assume people ask me to play as them, I know that they aren't fully finished yet. I know that they're getting at least 3 new units, possibly 4. But I would say that aggression is really what they do. It's Blitzkrieg comes to mind in many ways. Their javelins are their strength. Look at this, all of these Muhad Berserkers charging forward like an army of ants. But yes, the aggression is really what suits Harad best. If you can inflict a lot of wounds on your opponent quickly, then you'll do well, I think. But you don't have the comfort of many of the Orc factions of the numbers to back that up with. So it is kind of interesting. It reminds me a lot of the Beastmen from Total War, actually. Well, Warhammer, I should say. Whereby, you know, they're a faction that relies on their aggression as well, but a lot of people don't think they're quite as good as something like the Vampires in that game, where it's a little bit more safe to use them in an aggressive manner. But I do think there is a place for Harad. I think that they are a good faction to use, provided you're willing to be bold with them, because sitting back and trying to absorb pressure is never going to work. You don't have the long-range skirmish power, and you don't have the heavy-duty units. The Serpent Guard will do okay, provided they're not put up against something that's very, very strong, like something like Haven Guard or Temple Inquisitors or Nazkai would cleave through them in a hurry, as well as Trolls. Meanwhile, if we look back over here, the Dale player is now starting to move forward his main army, which is good. He's sending forward his Lake Town infantry first, which is to be expected. Now, unfortunately for him over here, he is taking a bit of a beating with regards to his archers, because the Woodland Realms cavalry managed to get around. Now, in a sustained melee, the Earls will beat the Elder Pathfinders. The Elder Pathfinders are good off a charge, and they are pretty lethal. But ultimately, the Earls are exactly what you need to sort of ward off enemy cav like this. So he has moved his cav from my line, but that doesn't really matter anymore, because most of my army is moving forwards, sort of into this position whereby they won't be charged from the back, because I did lay down these stakes. The one gap is being covered by my general. He's taking some arrow fire, but again, heavy cav, you know, unless your arrows are armor piercing, don't bother. I am receiving more and more elven resistance over here, because the battle between the Woodland Realms and the Dale infantry force hasn't really begun yet. Now, the Dirith are going to be a bit of a challenge for me to break down, but hopefully we should be able to manage it, particularly with Harad's, at the moment, Harad's best infantry unit, at least their best full infantry unit. They do have a unit that's better in melee, but the Trollmen of Harad, they're like a more aggressive, focused, heavy infantry unit. Again, I said I would go over them in a similar vein as I would the Nazkai bodyguards and the Elder Royal Guards, and, well, the Elder Palace Guards, I should say. And that's true, because they are a rather unique unit in this respect. So they will do a very good job at holding. However, they are even tougher than the Serpent Guard, and they have more of a bite to them, but they are, of course, much more expensive. Well, I say much more expensive. They're not a ton more, but they are a real staple of Harad at the moment. Now, my Haradrim Spearmen are here, and they will get ripped apart by everything Isengard has left. Even the Uruk-hai Raiders will trade very efficiently with them. The Trolls are going to smash through them. The Berserkers are going to do a decent amount of damage while they're still in the fight, and the Serpent Guard are going to hold, but I'm going to send in those Trollmen pretty quickly. We look over here. Dale is finally making their advance. Several of their units of Lake Town infantry are moving in. Now, not a lot of the Woodland Realms units are going to shudder at the thought of fighting Lake Town infantry. They're not great, but they are a decent sort of, you know, standard bread and butter unit. But the Woodland Realms, they're just all about quality. And stuff like the Hir En Ek you know, they're easily going to hold the line against Lake Town infantry. In the background there you see the enemy cav, and the Dale cav is still sitting back. Again, Dale's engaging in a little bit of a piecemeal fashion here. There are gaps that he could exploit, but ultimately this is a careful advance here is not really much of a surprise, because the Woodland Realms units do have the advantage 1-to-1. So trying to engage in a smart way is not a bad move, although they do need to back up these Lake Town infantry pretty quickly with something a little bit more serious, because they are falling by the wayside very quickly, especially now that the Hira and Lang are in the battle. So Dale is finally engaged. It's a bit more of a wide front line, which should suit Dale in the end, because they do have numbers on their side against the elves. Isengard, on the other hand, weren't really able to use their superior numbers in this narrow choke point. Now, unfortunately for Isengard, their trolls are starting to fall away. The Dirith are now in battle, though, and they're at the front. They will do a very fine job against most of what I have. The Berserkers would trade not terribly with them, but they are a little haggard at this point. But again, I'm ready to send in my next wave. Now, though, I did bring up my Muhard Tribesmen. So my Javelins are hoping to get some decent pot shots in on their Dirith, and any other heavily armoured unit they send forward. I'm trying to get some damage done to them. The Javelins for Harad really are the main event. I'm sending forward the Trollmen, I'm sending forward the Halberds to push the line up, and I am slowly pushing this line back. If you see where the death started, I'm slowly pushing the Isengard player back, getting the Trollmen ready just in case they slip through the line. Now the Muhard Tribesmen, you know, they will do a decent job against armoured units. They will trade very nicely with them, so I'm firing in, trying to get these Dirith. You know, it's not really a case of them being super armoured, it's a case of them being the most dangerous unit that's here at the moment. But I will eventually shift my focus to the Guards of Orthanc, because they are all about the armour, all about the survivability, so if I can deal with them quickly, that would be nice. If we look over here, the Dalian engagement is going... Well, the Woodland Realms have done a pretty good job at making sure they can't be outright flanked, but over here they're going to struggle because, you know, Barding Herd are pretty good. They're going to hold the line well. Again, Woodland Realms not overly reliant on armour, but as halberdiers they will be able to hold Lake Town infantry, so really it's a matter of can the elves hold their unit sizes together, because 1-to-1 they will win, obviously. Here, this is a little bit more of a problem for Dale, because the Hira and Ek are here, and also so are the Sindar Blade Masters. However, so are the Dale Sword Masters, and the Dale Sword Masters are a very, very strong unit. Very good attack. Again, not really too important that they're good against armour, but their overall high attack score is going to serve them in very good stead here. They should break through here eventually with 2 units of Sword Masters and a decent amount of infantry. There are also the pikes which are back there. They're going to be sent forward in the next wave. If we look over here, we can see the advance of some of the Elder Pathfinders. Now, I did actually move up my halberdiers so that my ally could not be flanked by the cav, because I did see them moving over here. Now, unfortunately, this does mean that they were in full view of the archers, and they're going to get really a ruddy good seeing to by the Uruk-hai archers, but hopefully, I was thinking that he was using his arrows for a long time, so hopefully he was nearly out of ammo. Hoping to just keep the enemy cav from slipping in and giving my ally grief. Again, the front line over here is going very well for me. I'm sending in those javelins. They're going to do very well against the Guards of Orthanc. The Dirith are now, you know, they're losing ground because they're losing unit models, particularly against something like the Trollmen. The Trollmen were fresh, they're coming in, and they're going to do a very nice job at most everything that's over here at the present moment in time. Really what they need is the Nazkai forward. The Nazkai would really give me a bit of cause for concern, because even my Trollmen, as good as they are not going to do a particularly good job against Nazkai. But the problem is Nazkai need support of their own, and they're running out of other units here. The front line fight over here has been long, and it's been pretty gruesome, pretty grindy, but I am very slowly gaining the upper hand here. Meanwhile, if we look over there, the wargs are slowly sort of starting to move in, waiting for their moment to pounce, but my cav is ready for them. My Southron archers here are idle. They're out of ammo, but I'm just keeping them in reserve. Now, here are my Demons of the Desert. They're the best unit Harad have. They're a javelin unit that does a lot of damage. They're very good in melee. 3 hit points, a ton of missile damage. It's close to 30, I think, so I'm keeping them for the Nazkai. That was my plan, anyway. This part of the front line over here is looking a little bit suspect for Dale, but the Woodland Realms don't really have enough in the way of numbers to actually make, you know, actually do anything with that. The Dalian numbers are starting to tell in a few places, although over here the Lang and the Ek have managed to sort of break a little flank here. Unfortunately for the Woodland Realms, however, the Lake Town pikemen are here to shore up the line. Ultimately, however, they don't really have numbers, and this is the problem with the elves. Unless you can sort of find a way to use the natural choke points, you're in a bit of trouble. Now, the elves did start in one of the most open parts of the field, but they could have fallen back. They could have deployed a little closer to their ally even. If you have a tight formation with the elves with that archer power, you're going to do a lot of damage. Now, if you look over here, I'm sending some Muhard tribesmen around to the flank to back up my halberdiers, but while I was here, I noticed that this unit here, which is the Champions of the White Hand, this is a very expensive warg unit, very deadly as well in terms of a cav-to-cav fight. I noticed they were right in range. So I was ready to throw some javelins at them, and I think my Muhard tribesmen are throwing them. Well, I know that that's what they're going to do. Meanwhile, if we look over there, we can see that the enemy wargs are trying to flank. I think that they realise that they need to do something because the Isengard front line is faltering a little bit. Now, the thing to note about wargs is off a charge, they're not quite as devastating. It's really sustained melee against cav you want to be getting into. If you take a frontal charge from a unit of very good heavy cav like the Serpent Bodyguard is, the wargs are going to suffer for it. So they're going to take quite a few casualties off the charge, and also I have my Demons of the Desert here to save my general. So if we look back over here, are my javelins firing? Oh no, they were just out of range, that was it. Meanwhile, if we look over here real quick, we'll notice that the Woodland Realms front line is really struggling, and also their cav is caught in prolonged melee with the Earls, which means they're going to lose. So really on all fronts at this point our enemies were struggling a little bit, it's fair to say. They were running out of units that they could use. Meanwhile, if you look over here, my Muhard tribesmen, this was something that I was glad of. This was a micro mistake, obviously. You wouldn't leave one of your most expensive units in full view of devastating javelins, but you know, obviously there was quite a bit going on with regards to his wargs back there, which I pretty handily beat down with a combination of that initial charge with my Serpent Bodyguard and my Demons of the Desert. There were a few casualties for me. I knew that there would be, but I was just hoping my general wouldn't die. But I ended up with a cav unit that was still pretty damn healthy, so I was now able to go out on offensive cavalry manoeuvres of my own at last, and my Demons of the Desert were free to join the front line over here and help push back. And you know, you can see where the pushing has really been effective. A lot of Serpent Guard died in the middle initially, but there are still quite a few Serpent Guard in the fight. They've really performed very well for me. The Guards of Orthanc are a good unit, but they're not particularly devastating on the attack, so stuff like the Trollmen is going to do a very good job against them. So if you look back here, Isengard, they still have a Champion of the White Hand here. And also, I'm a little bit confused as to why they left some of these really, really important units back here until the end, like the Nazkai Bodyguard and the Uruk-hai. I was actually wondering, because the Nazkai must have joined the fight at some point, because even during the battle I kind of lost sight of where they actually were. So I assume they did actually join the fight at the front line here at some point. And yes, they did. I can see Saruman. So they did commit the Nazkai eventually. They are in the fight, but ultimately it's a little bit too late because they don't have the support they need. And I also have the ability to fire into the flank of them with my Muhard tribesmen. Now my unit of Serpent Bodyguard was able to reinforce this part of the line, which was faltering a little bit. It was kind of a mutually assured destruction here between the Woodland Realms and the Dale forces, because neither one came out looking particularly great. Over here, on the other hand, the Dalian numbers are starting to thin a little bit, it must be said. The Hir en Ek, and there are still Sindar Blade Masters galore. And if this was just a basic infantry fight, I would say that the Woodland Realms have this in the bag here, but unfortunately for them, the thing that they really have to worry about now is the fact that the Earls are here, and the Earls have cav superiority. There are Champions of the White Hand over here, but there aren't enough of them after those javelin volleys. And now these Earls are going to charge into the backs of these Elves, and this is going to start to give the advantage back to Dale. Again, not the best charge, but it's still going to be pretty darn effective. You know, all they need to do is sort of tilt the scales back in their favour a little bit. These pikes and the Hir en Ek, you know, the Elves are also getting tired, so it shows how long they've actually been fighting. If you look back over here, there's still that little pocket of resistance. Interestingly enough as well, I did send my cav over here to try and get into his backlines, but unfortunately he did have crossbows in the waiting for me, and I took a ton of damage to my general. The Isengard general died first, however. Fortunately, my general survived the savaging he got from the Uruk-hai crossbows, and instead I decided I would sort of send him back here to deal with the scraps of elven archers that are still firing, because that's really all they're good for at the moment. That cav unit is very damaged after the crossbow fire. Now, to try and stop the crossbow fire, I did send in my Muhad tribesmen that are out of ammo and just sort of charge them in to sort of occupy them, in addition to that Muhad beast tamer unit I had. And I'm also sending up my demons of the desert. Now, they should do very well against any Nazkai that come into combat, and they are on the way, so the demons of the desert will throw their javelins, and then hopefully after the damage is done, be superior in melee. Over here, the Isengard front line is falling apart. They don't have very many men left at all. The Trollmen stand tall and victorious. The Serpent Guard are still alive in places as well, so a combination of the Trollmen with their damage and the Serpent Guard with their value for money can be an effective... Well, there goes the Woodland Realms general. It can be an effective front line. I think that the Woodland Realms player had the right idea with the main line he had. I think he just spread himself a little thin, because at this point the Dale player was able... Well, Dwayling here was able to very comprehensively run around and just use the superior numbers and the cav that he had brought to really just put an end to Dale's hopes, well, Dale's hopes, the Sylvan Elves' hopes. Now, my general was actually caught in combat with the dregs of some archer units, but again the Dale Earls came over to help me out with that. So our cav now has superiority, and in a situation like this, when your cav has superiority in a battle, it's pretty much game over, regardless of what the enemy does. You could even just cycle charge them to death with how strong cav is now. If you look over here, however, the demons of the desert are throwing their javelins in. Now, crossbows will do a decent amount of damage to them. Admittedly, this isn't the ideal way to use them, but at this point in the battle it didn't really matter to me. All I needed to do was finish off this unit of Nazkai bodyguard, which was the only really scary unit that he had remaining. Only 17 of them left against 51 demons of the desert, so this fight is mine to win, basically. And if we look over here, I was victorious on this front line, so I'm sending forward my Trollmen as well. Again, the dam is broken, basically. I still have a decent amount of my Trollmen left, although a lot of my other infantry, obviously all of my low tier units are gone. My Southron archers are pretty much dead. There's still one unit of them of 58, but the other two are fully dead. There's a few Serpent Guards still remaining, I believe. Yes, there is. There's only 5 of them remaining, but they have been basically fighting since the beginning of the fight. Yeah, I think that the aggression that Harad can employ in a frontline fight like that serves them very well. And Isengard are really a faction that have to be aggressive as well, so I was going to be aggressive regardless of who I was fighting. The build that I picked, pretty reliant on the javelins and the Trollmen, was always going to be like that. Now, the Earls charged into the crossbows because they were a little bit more healthy than my Serpent Guard, but I'm bringing them in as well so we can tie up these archers. We go back over here, see if there's anything left of the Elves at all. There are still a few units, and if we look over here, fighting back to back in this little circle are the Hirat and Ek. So it's a real heroic last stand from the Woodland Elves infantry, which did pretty well. The Woodland Elf player really didn't do much wrong, in the sense that the initial skirmish was handily won by them. The infantry fight in many places was going pretty swimmingly for them, but unfortunately it was a case of numbers, and the Dale player being able to sort of overlap in many places, including with the cav. I think the Woodland Realms, if they had deployed closer to Isengard and coordinated their efforts a little more, I think that they would have had a lot more success, particularly against the Dale advance. And they would have probably been able to hold out against my advance as well, because if the Woodland Realms had turned their arrows on me, my units would have been significantly worse off, because Harad, not the most armoured force in the world, and arrows are a bit of a problem for them, especially arrows as good as the Woodland Realms, so they would have really damaged me, and it's why I was glad I was squaring off against Isengard in this fight, because this build works better against people who answer aggression with aggression.
Scour them from the field.
So that is the Woodland Elves dead, and at this point I think we can safely speed up the fight, because it's really just a matter of these Uruk-hai staying in the fight. They are going to fight to the last.
This is a day of victory.
Well, I say that, they admitted defeat, but it was essentially a fight to the last, and again, my forces performed very well, but again, those kills between me and my ally were sort of broken by the fact that I was facing an Orc faction, he was facing an Elf faction, so don't read too much into the disparity between our kills there. I think that they did pretty well, honestly. I think that the Isengard player really should have supported his initial advance a little better, because he essentially threw that first wave of trash away. And trash they may be, but they can still be pretty useful to pad your advance. I think maybe if he led with his trolls and with his clansmen and then backed it up with his Uruk-hai infantry, Interesting to see no pikemen from Isengard. I think that pikemen to sort of reinforce his line would have made it a lot easier on him, because the Isengard pikes were something I wouldn't really have an answer to. The beast tamers can go toe to toe with them in a way, but the pikes are much better at it. If we look at my forces, the Serpent Bodyguard did okay. The Demons of the Desert didn't get involved until later on. Muhad Tribesmen, a lot of high quality kills from them. That was really where I started to break the Isengard line. That was later on in the fight. The Southron Archers got a lot of kills, but a lot of it was against rubbish like Dunland Clansmen and Uruk-hai Archers. So again, kind of even Stevens there. My most impressive unit was a unit of dismounted Serpent Guard, so it really goes to show how strong they can really be, provided they're up against units that they can comfortably deal with. The Trollmen, you know, they were really the hammer in the final nail in the coffin, because again they attacked when the Muhad Tribesmen were also throwing their javelins. Beast Tamers did okay, they were really just there to hold the line. Muhad Berserkers, they did well because they blunted the Isengard attack when it was at its most powerful with the trolls and with those Uruk-hai infantry. Haradrim Spears, they did surprisingly well. You know, those kill counts are not ideal, but they did well at holding the line, and my catapult got a decent amount of kills in the end. It paid for itself, but it didn't really deliver the decisive blow. So that is the Dead Marshes, and that is Harad. I actually quite like Harad. I think that when they're finished, they will be a real force to be reckoned with in the right hands. Of course, I didn't even go into the fact I didn't bring Mumakil. Mumakil are more fragile than they used to be. They are certainly not something you want to send against a faction that's javelin heavy. But against the elves, I would say Mumakil are still pretty lethal if you use them at the right time and their archers can't just single them out. So yeah, I think Harad, when they're finished with those new units, in a similar way to the High Elves, I think they're poised for greatness. Maybe not quite there, but they'll get there. And next, well, I don't know, I mean, if you've got any other requests for a faction to play, someone did request that I play Canned in addition to Harad in the last video, so maybe I'll play Canned next if people want me to. If any other requests come through, I can also do them. And again, you know, top 10 crossbows will hopefully be happening pretty soon, and any other requests, just let me know, and I hope you'll join me for that, and I hope you enjoyed this one.